Okay, so today, can you see me? So, you can see me like this. Today we are reading from, the same thing, sorry. We're reading the same book. This explains everything. And we are reading the chapter, Metaphors Are in the Mind, by Benjamin K. Bergen, an associate professor of cognitive science at the University of California, San Diego, UCSD. There are two things I want to say before this chapter. This is 3 pages. Number one is that I can easily put subtitles on all of these chapters, and subtitles would be really useful. All I have to do is, I have the PDFs of the books, all I have to do is copy and paste it into the subtitles. The thing is that easy things aren't easy for my ADHD brain to do it on its own. ADHD brains need community, so I need you to be my prefrontal cortex and my motivator. So if you put a comment asking for subtitles, try to do that. I mean, come on, if you think it's just about me trying to get engagement, come on. Hey guys, put a comment saying you want subtitles. That's the best I can come up with for engagement. Come on. Okay. The second thing is that, and this you're going to understand later, cleanliness and morality, hygiene and morality are related in the brain. Specifically, there is, for instance, a structure called the insula in the brain, which is involved in disgust and anticipation of pleasure. And so, sorry, I lost my train of thought. The insula, anticipation of pleasure and disgust, and we see activation of the insula when subjects are either looking at something physically disgusting or looking at an act that violates either the social code or a moral code. But even if it's just something like, you're not supposed to dress this kind of way, when someone has dressed that kind of way, we're gonna go like this. And that's what I want to tell you also, is that that's disgust. And that makes sense, right? I don't know whether this blocks the nose or what, but if we're around something that's disgusting, of course there's a reaction triggered to protect ourselves from the disgust. So we close our eyes a little bit more. I don't know whether this blocks the nose or what, but there's a nose thing. And that facial expression of disgust is made whether the situation is health related or morality. Okay. Metaphors are in the mind. Benjamin K. Bergen, associate professor of cognitive science at UCSD. I study language, and in my field there have been a couple of game-changing explanations over the centuries. One of them explains how languages change over time. Another explains why all languages share certain characteristics. But my favorite is the one that... Am I recording? But my favorite is the one that originally got me hooked on language and the mind. It's an explanation of metaphor. When you look closely at how we use language, you find that a lot of what we say is metaphorical. We talk about certain things as though they were other things. We describe political campaigns as horse races. Senator Jones has pulled ahead. Morality is cleanliness. That was a dirty trick. And understanding is seeing. New finding illuminates the structure of the universe. Illuminates is the italicized word there. People have known about metaphor for a long time. Until the end of the 20th century, almost everyone agreed on one particular explanation, neatly articulated by Aristotle. Metaphor was seen as a strictly linguistic device, a kind of catchy turn or phrase in which you call one thing by the name of another thing it's similar to. This is probably the definition of metaphor you learned in high school English. According to this view, or whatever your native tongue is. So high school, whatever. According to this view, you can metaphorically say that Juliet is the sun if and only if Juliet and the sun are similar. For instance, if they are both particularly luminous. But in their 1980 book, Metaphors We Live By, George Lakoff and Mark Johnson proposed an explanation for metaphorical language that flouted this received wisdom. They reasoned that if metaphor is just a free-floating linguistic device based on similarity, then you should be able to metaphorically describe anything in terms of anything else it's similar to. But Lakoff and Johnson observed that real metaphorical language, as actually used, isn't haphazard at all. Instead, it's systematic and coherent. It's systematic in that you don't just metaphorically describe anything as anything else. Instead, it's mostly abstract things that you describe in terms of concrete things. Morality is more abstract than cleanliness. Understanding is more abstract than seeing. And you can't reverse the metaphors. While you can say he's clean to mean he has no criminal record, you can't say he's moral to mean that he bathed recently. Metaphor is unidirectional. Metaphorical expressions are also coherent with one another. Take the example of understanding and seeing. There are lots of relevant metaphorical expressions. For example, I see what you mean, and, ou en français, ah, je vois ce que tu veux dire. Let's shed some light on the issue. En français, je peux dire, je sais pas, éclaircis-moi ça. Voilà. And put his idea under a microscope and see if it actually makes sense, and so on. While these are totally different metaphorical expressions, they use completely different words, they all coherently cast certain aspects of understanding in terms of specific aspects of seeing. You always describe the understander as the seer. The understandability of You always describe the understander as the seer, the understood idea as the seen object, the act of understanding as seeing, the understandability of the idea as the visibility of the object, and so on. In other words, the aspects of seeing that you use to talk about aspects of understanding stand in a fixed mapping to one another. In other words, the aspects of seeing that you use to talk about aspects of understanding stand in a fixed mapping to one another. These observations led Lakoff and Johnson to propose that there was something going on with metaphor that was deeper than just the words. They argued that the metaphorical expressions in language are really only surface phenomena, organized and generated by mappings in people's minds. For them, the reason metaphorical language exists and is systematic and coherent is that people think metaphorically. You don't just talk about understanding as seeing, you think about understanding as seeing. You don't just talk about morality as cleanliness, you think about morality as cleanliness. And it's because you think metaphorically, because you systematically map certain concepts onto others in your mind, that you speak metaphorically. The metaphorical expressions are merely, so to speak, the tip of the iceberg. As explanations go, this one covers all the bases. It's elegant in that it explains messy and complicated phenomena in terms of something much simpler, a structured mapping between two conceptual domains in the mind. It's powerful in that it explains things other than metaphorical language. Recent work in cognitive psychology shows that people think metaphorically even in the absence of metaphorical language. Affection is warmth, morality is cleanliness. The conceptual metaphor explanation suggests that we understand abstract concepts like affection or morality by metaphorically mapping them onto more concrete concepts. In terms of utility, the conceptual metaphor explanation has generated extensive research in a variety of fields. Linguists have documented the richness of metaphorical language and explored its diversity across the globe. Psychologists have tested its predictions in human behavior, and neuroscientists have searched the brain for its physical underpinnings. And finally, the conceptual metaphor explanation is transformative. It does away with the accepted idea that metaphor is just a linguistic advice based on similarity. In an instant, it made us rethink more than 2,000 years of received wisdom. This isn't to say that the conceptual metaphor explanation doesn't have its weaknesses, or that it's the final word in the study of metaphor. But it's an explanation that casts a huge shadow, so to speak. All right, and also the other note. So metaphor is just metaphor language. They're just byproducts of other things that we evolved with, such as an ability to see the relationship between things, an ability to handle abstract things. But we can't really handle abstract things, which is why we reduce them to sort of concrete things when we actually deal with them. Which, I mean, honestly, if you ask somebody to define an abstract concept, well, never mind, I'm not going to go make that point. So, anyway, let's take, for example, so here's V.S. Ramachandran. I think this was his idea for sort of the origins of language. Basically, all right, first thing I have to tell you is that I'm going to draw two shapes. And I'm going to ask you to tell me which of these... Alright, let's do this. So, Kiki, Boo Boo. Okay. Shit, there may have been too many. Okay. Which one's Kiki and which one's Boo Boo? Pretty much everyone says the same thing. I don't know whether you're trying to be difficult right now, but Kiki, Boo Boo. Boo Boo, it's rounder, visually rounder, and rounder of the mouth, and it's a rounder sound. Kiki, it's sharp. Sharp, okay. So basically there's this idea that as these apes were climbing these trees and, I don't know, maybe talking about clouds or something, if they want to say like, or, you know, early humans, if they want to say like, you know, I don't know, or no, apes even. I think it was all about apes and like climbing trees and a branch being like this versus like this. Anyway, the point is that language isn't real, and it's just a product of, you know, and I'm fucking up this explanation because I can't remember what he was saying about the branches, and that's distracting me. So you just look it up. Kiki, Boo Boo. Look it up. All right, thanks.